IVM.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 91 of Shunya 1. We have a really fun episode coming up for you. We have Akanksha Hazari of Mpaani. Mpaani is a local commerce platform, and we have a really interesting conversation about the ins and outs of commerce and the future of electronic commerce in India. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. In the meantime, let me get you up on what's going on our Slack channel. We had Gaurav Jalan of M-Pocket on last week, and we were talking about student credit and things like that. So we asked the question on the Slack channel. Should college students in India be eligible for a credit card? Yes or no? The answer was fairly surprising to me. We got about 2/3 people saying yes, but a third of people saying no. I was kind of surprised by that. I thought the answers would go clearly in one direction, but there was a split. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Akanksha, and we'll be back right after this break. This show is brought to you by Savari. Savari is India's largest intercity cab service, and they've been around since 2006. They are a chauffeur-driven cab company. They offer intercity, full-day, and half-day cabs, as well as airport transports. What I really enjoy about it is how easy it is to book and how transparent the billing is. You could go to the website www.savari.com, that's Savari with 2 A's, or you can call them at their call center. The drivers are highly trained and experienced. They're well-versed in local information and routes. I've been using the service for years, and I've been really, really happy with it. There's also a lot of flexibility in terms of what kind of cars you can get. You can get hatchback sedans, Innovas, or even luxury cars. They offer fully customizable itineraries and honor requests like getting an English-speaking driver or a car with a luggage transfer. If you want to try them out, what I'd suggest is go to the website or the app or wherever and use the discount code IVM Travel. What you would get with IVM Travel, that's IVMTRAVEL, is you'd get 250 rupees off with the code. And if you pay by Amazon Pay, you would be able to get an extra 300 rupees off. That actually would work out to a really good deal. So that's Savari, SAVAARI.com, or go to their app, or you can give them a call on their call center.
All right, welcome to the show, Akanksha. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good as well. Thank you for doing this. We've been on monosyllabic conversations on WhatsApp trying to coordinate
months now.
For months.
Yeah, 4 months.
Trying to coordinate this show, saying this week, no, too busy, something coming up.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's great to finally have you here. Thank you so much for making it.
Thank you for having me.
We are excited to hear more about all the cool stuff you're doing. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and a little bit background about, how you came to be on this entrepreneurship journey of yours?
Sure. So obviously I'm the founder and CEO of Mpaani, and that's how we've connected. I guess a little bit of background about me. I'm originally from Pune. Kind of was in Pune till I was about 8 or 9, and then moved to Hong Kong with my dad's job. I think the biggest thing that's probably most relevant from my upbringing to how I ended up being an entrepreneur on this crazy journey is, the context in which we started is my parents started with 45 rupees, actually 44 rupees. They corrected me recently.
Wow.
So, a set of parents that started with less than $1 and have built us as a family into, a very comfortable position today, touch wood, has also kind of created from a very young age going through a journey of having not very much into having to work very, very hard alongside my parents to get to where we are. Mm-hmm. And I think that set the context of especially from my mom. So one of my things my mom would always tell me when I was young is, the value of your life depends on the difference you make in the lives of others. And so my personal journey was always, okay, well, whatever I do with my life, I want to make sure that it has some sort of impact. Mm-hmm. And you'll probably see kind of my early years was trying to figure that out. So it started with, so she wanted me to be a doctor. I was very clear that I didn't want to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. So I kind of ran away to the States. And, I was the first person to have a university in my nuclear family. My mom went back to university at 45 with 18-year-olds because we could afford it then.
Oh, wow.
So you should have her. She's actually the much more interesting person to talk to.
That's quite a feat.
So yes, she went to university, raised 2 kids, and worked 2 jobs for most of my life until I went to university. I started working when I was 16, and I was a professional squash player, junior pro, since I was 10. But everything I had to make sure I was sponsored so we could afford it. And then university, I basically washed dishes through Princeton and cleaned cafeterias.
Wow.
So that's kind of the context of the DNA.
Amazing origin story, but yes.
So I think, if you see, one, I knew I didn't want to do medicine, but I thought, okay, well, politicians and policy are supposed to make a difference in the world. So I actually ended up doing, at Princeton, majoring in politics and Middle East studies and doing pre-law. And I thought, okay, well, that's the way difference gets made. And then I went to Washington and I started my first company in parallel to my first job. And I realized I hated politics. I found that most people seem to have very self-interested agendas and were the least bit interested in actually what impact they were having. I was like, this is not the place for me. But because I had my first kind of accidental, let's say, entrepreneurship journey in parallel, there was me and 4 friends that started something called Young Professionals in Foreign Policy, which is still the first think tank in the world for young people. So it was supposed to be the Aspen Institute or Council on Foreign Relations equivalent, but for let's say 20-year-olds to 40-year-olds, because we saw this big gap, and we were basically building a think tank and product for ourselves. And that I loved. One, I loved the process of building something that clearly had a purpose. So the vision was, we need to train young leaders long before they're in leadership positions. And tomorrow and today's leaders should be having a conversation. Tomorrow's leaders need to learn from today's leaders, and today's leaders need to realize things are changing so fast that what young people have to say really matters. And so it literally started as this concept of having these private off-the-record discussions with 40 screened young people, what we consider to be high potential young people, with people like Condoleezza Rice or Wolf Blitzer. And because it was off the record, we could ask anything and they would be very frank.
Wow.
And that's kind of the genesis of YPFP. And YPFP today is in 9 countries. When I resigned from the board, we were in 3 countries, 4 cities. So it's continued to grow. But that was my first accidental venture, something I personally felt a lot of passion for, and then realized, you have to incorporate and you have to make money and you have to do all these other things. And I was like, we're building a business. That's what we're doing. And then I saw, when you build a business, you can have such a huge impact as well. And you build something that can live beyond you, which I think is very powerful. So then I quickly left the policy world and said, let me go get some business skills. Worked in consulting for a couple of years doing investments and M&A in clean tech. And then actually came back to India and worked in agriculture. So once I figured out I wanted to build things, and then I realized I want to go back to India and build things because that's where we started. And I still, have a deep connection and I would say sense of patriotism to India, irrespective of how much I've had the privilege to move around. And so came back and said, okay, well, what's an industry that would enable for me to see all of India, not city kind of elite India. Exactly. So I worked in agriculture. So I had the opportunity to work at this consulting firm called TechnoServe. And I got put on an agri-tech project. And keep in mind, this was the first mobile revolution. So this was
Which year was this?
2010, 11. So the feature phone was just taking off. So the project was, I basically for an entire year got to live in villages from Arunachal down to Karnataka. An entire year, I would literally just move across the country. And in different sizes of villages, we would look at, how can technology increase farmer income and how can value-added processing increase farmer income?
Wow.
And so in that process, I personally felt like, okay, I understand again where we are today as a country, and Bharat, not India.
Right.
And then technology. I mean, it was really mind-blowing. I know it was all over the news, but to actually be in an unelectrified village, which has basically no services, but see people there have phones, was a huge moment, because it was finally we can reach anybody. This is unprecedented in human history, that every citizen can be spoken to directly.
Right.
And so now we're in a completely new landscape to build on. A new layer has been built, a new sense of a democratic layer has been built. And that got me really excited. And that's when I also had the opportunity to interact with local businesses. And, wherever I went, there were small businesses. And so that's really where the seed of kind of Mpaani came together, where it was the problem statement I saw is we have a huge population. When you go to the far corners of the country, some things are working. Everyone now has a handset in their hand. You have small businesses and distribution of small products, HUL, PNG. Everyone has reached every consumer. So business seems to be working and delivering. But on the other side, you don't have basic services.
Right.
So how do we use what's working to solve what's not working? And so that's where the evolution of Mpaani came and started with a concept of the first mass market loyalty program, where for consumers, how can we enable them to actually earn points from daily expenses instead of it being something we earn when we get on flights and more towards the, prosperous consumer.
Right.
And that almost becomes like a second income for them that they can use anyway, either to redeem for things they couldn't afford or to create savings. And on the other side of that ecosystem would be small merchants, because that's where most people shop, and brands. And since then, it's evolved a lot.
Right.
So
I remember the early concept of when I heard about Mpaani, and again, loyalty is such a subject which is always, like you said, it's been in the privileged sector. It's always been for the sector of who spend more with a brand, and you try to build loyalty there. But you took that and you applied it to people who could actually use it.
Yeah.
Because the common misnomer about loyalty is that the points don't matter, or the points rarely get really utilized. Like most people don't use their loyalty program benefits as much. But you saw that the audience you were going after really needed it.
Yeah.
And you were able to build that bridge. How did you see, as a concept, why did you think that this would really go with this demographic you were going after? Because they literally valued, maybe, or still value cash more than points. How did that
So the concept was basically increasing value through a currency, because you also have to make the business side work, right? Because the product side of it was creating a loyalty solution for small businesses to actually be able to retain customers and grow their businesses, and for brands to finally reach all types of consumers in a meaningful way and start dealing with things like retention, acquisition much more efficiently. And so you couldn't do it from a normal cashback system. And interestingly, in the early days, we actually showed the data showed us that consumers actually, after the first redemption, would choose to save for 8 to 9 months for something aspirational. So usually the first redemption is a trust test.
Yes. Right.
Do you actually get the discount? Do you actually get the reward that you're promised? After you have, then the consumer behavior changes to saving a lot more. And then people will do their first mobile phone, their first home appliance, which also serves the B2B side of it, because they're getting to keep that consumer. And that's kind of where the journey started. And so we properly launched the business around 2015 when we raised our first round, built out, apps. And I think the tech journey is really interesting, because I think we're one of the first companies to build tech for Bharat. I remember in 2013-14 when people told me I'm interested in mass market.
Right.
Nobody, I had to literally educate people about why that those 1 billion consumers matter, because everyone was obsessed with that. It wasn't even top 50 million then. It was top 10 million at best. And I remember those investor conversations were so painful, so painful. And so our tech journey has been really interesting, because we've spent so much time building for mass market consumers and thinking about local languages and all these things that people are thinking about now, and also local business owners, which are a very different audience than the normal audience.
How do you interact? What kind of products or what kind of, how does your product work for local business owners? Right?
Sure.
If you're a small business owner, how would they interact with you?
So the interesting thing that happened for us between 2015 and today is we developed from starting as a mass market loyalty program to becoming a much more retailer-focused business. So because we had to build a loyalty solution, which initially was an SMS-based loyalty program.
Yeah, in 2015 it wasn't smartphones.
No.
Yeah.
So it was short codes. You would give points by short codes. You would add members by short codes. And India is not like Africa where you can get access to USSD.
Right.
So it was short code system. And consumers obviously would interact or track their balance by SMS. Now, the more we interacted with small business owners, we understood that the challenges they faced were far beyond loyalty. Loyalty was actually a value-added service for them. It didn't really speak to the core of digitization, organization. And then the macro market has really moved tremendously in the last 2015, now we're barely in 2019, 3.5 years, where two trends have happened, right? So one is that you have new forms of commerce that have come in that are new to all Indian consumers. So you have the mass market Bharat consumer that's also been exposed to e-commerce and also been exposed to new large format retail experiences. So it's no longer the high income consumer that expects more. Every Indian consumer suddenly expects more. I want to be digital first. The e-commerce platforms have spoiled us with discounts, spoiled us with campaigns. Just the experience of starting online now is something everybody wants to do.
Yeah.
And the second is, whether it's the D-Marts or the big bazaars, all these large format retailers have exposed, again, every Indian consumer to a nicer experience, self-serve, AC, a different type of thing. So suddenly, retailers, the small local retailer,
The kiranas,
the
even,
chemists, you're like hyper-local businesses, and we've always focused on daily expense businesses, have a new pressure on them because it's not that the high-income consumer is changing. No, it's your local neighborhood lady whose expectations are now that of a high-income consumer, but at the same price point. And you had Jio on top of that. So now you have this digitally driven mass market consumer that has incredibly high expectations that the local business owner is not currently equipped to serve. And so we moved from having this loyalty solution to today being a full digitization solution for the local business owner, and with a new vision for what hyperlocal shopping should look like.
So things like point of sale, CRM, those kinds of solutions for them?
So today we basically are their entire digital storefront, enabling them to be an online-offline store.
Wow.
So a kirana can have a complete big basket-like experience. And our vision is that basically the new hyperlocal consumer experience is, how do we shop? We create a list of tasks, right? And first we'll make our list of tasks. We don't really organize them by store. It's a bunch of stuff I need to buy or a bunch of stuff I need to do. Now, in the oldest retail experience, you would then segregate those into areas and places and you would go execute them. Now what you do is probably segregate them by shop and maybe do a call or whatever it is. Ultimately, that should be completely digital and you shouldn't have to segregate them yourself. So our vision is that basically by digitizing hyperlocal businesses, we digitize the hyperlocal ecosystem. So for them, they actually can provide a better experience than going to a large platform. And for the consumer, when you create your list in a single place. You can choose who fulfills that list for you if you have a preference. And in some categories, people do care who their kirana is, their bhajiwala is, etc. If you don't have a preference, we will recommend something for you based on whoever has the highest service or quality within your location. So suddenly it's starting with your shopping list or task list, which is getting allocated intelligently and is being delivered to your home. And so we basically are becoming like, you want to call the midware now between hyperlocal and hyperlocal consumers.
Wow. What geographies are you starting to see this happen in most, right? I mean, like what parts of the country are you really...
So today we have about 20,000 retailers on the platform and nearly 1.5 million consumers on the platform. But we're a Mumbai-based company. And so we have retailers and consumers everywhere, but obviously the greatest depth or usage we'll see in Mumbai because we can actually go and interact with those retailers. So I think one thing that's really unique about us is we're a 27-person team. We have no sales team. We do no marketing. So everything has been a very product tech-led approach, and all growth pretty much has been organic.
So your vision, from what you're saying, that makes sense, right? Being in a certain area, you're able to kind of this, because it feels like network effects will be really, really important if you want this to happen, right? If there are a bunch of stores in a particular location using your service, then your service becomes more valuable to the customers in that store.
Exactly.
So you're going to have locations, right? You're going to have to start building offices in all these different places to do outreach.
In fact, remember, and that brings me to earlier question about your actual name, right?
I know it's super confusing now.
Yeah, because I remember you started out as Mpaani, which is M for mobile and Pani is water. So what was the genesis of that? And I remember a story around you starting out in, I think, the Dharavi area and doing a lot of stuff there.
So basically the name came from, so I had got the seed of this idea when I was working in agri-tech and ended up going to Cambridge to do my master's. But genuinely, that was a year to I'd done so many different things to kind of put it all together. And I'd made this commitment, I'm not going to apply for any jobs. And I don't care if I go to class, but you better have a business plan at the end of this year or you're going to be unemployed. And so there happened to be this competition that came along called the Hult Prize, which is the largest business plan competition in the world with $1 million prize from the Clinton Global Initiative and Bill Clinton. And the problem statement for the competition that was, can you create a business model that will solve the global water crisis?
Oh.
And so I kind of re-engineered and force-fitted, this is a loyalty program where all the rewards are focused on financing, water solutions, sanitation solutions. So all the rewards were kind of water filters, water infrastructure. The vision was, could you get a community to pool in their points together and actually invest in larger scale local projects?
Yeah.
So we went on to win that, and then the brand obviously had been developed for the competition.
Right.
And then because we won, we had all this press. And so then that's
obviously,
the name
you had
stuck.
I see.
So now we do deal with the challenge of retailers saying, so are you a water company? Or what are you selling me? So we do at some point need to address that problem.
But did that scale when you actually, you were initially doing that?
So as soon as we won, we unlocked the loyalty program to the original idea. And so we had all these impact rewards like water filters, solar lamps. But the idea was always that it was an innovation in financing for consumers and a business solution for retailers and potentially for brands to do more efficient targeting and advertising. But the name has stuck. At this point, I think
the brand's now bigger than what the name
potentially. I think what we're doing since that also has gone through an evolution. Maybe there's a moment where we decide that the name needs a rethought because now we're going into the consumer experience as well. And consumers don't know the brand Mpaani, and I think for them that may be confusing. I'm unsure. I'm not a branding specialist.
Amazon's the name of a river.
Yeah, who knows? Let's just say as a startup, it's not like the top of our list of priorities to solve right now.
Of course not.
On that note, I think we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk some more.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a great new week of shows on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure you do. And if you're not by now, why aren't you? You really, really should. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This week, we got a couple of new shows launching. The first one we have is ATKT Talent 10. The show is hosted by Rohit P. Man Pereira and Krupa Goyal. They're joined by the best talent from college classrooms across the country. Tune in every Tuesday for music, poetry, and fun ramblings. Business.next by Bloomberg Quint. Learn about what it takes to nurture a culture of constant innovation in business and shape an organization. It's hosted by Govindraj Athiraj and new episodes are out every Tuesday. The Equity Sahi Hai podcast is brought to you by the Motilal Oswal Asset Management Company. It's hosted by our very own Anupam Gupta and offers deep investment insights into sectors and stocks in a simple way. New episodes out every Tuesday. On Cyrus Says, sports presenter and commentator Ronak Kapoor talks about how his school life shaped him for the future, how sports commentary has evolved, his experience at the Cricket World Cup in Australia and more. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam is joined by financial educator and money mentor Mrin Agarwal to discuss investor behavior and the importance of creating a financial plan. On the Ronnie Screwvala podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open, Ronnie talks to me about his early life, moving from Grant Road to Brish Candy, organizing a rock concert in his youth, and taking calculated risks in life. On Dating is Garbage, Abbas and Janam talk to Zain and Avanti, the hosts of Marbles Lost and Found, about the role of mental health in a relationship. On What a Player, Akash and Siddhartha joined by fellow comedian Mikhail Almeida to discuss the last week of the ongoing cricket league before the playoffs. On The Habit Coach, Ashton talks about financial health, the relationship one develops with money, and how it leaves an impact on our body. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurabh talk to Shambhavi Nayak, a fellow at the Takshashila Institute, about gene sequencing and how it's changing our understanding of heredity and human history. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
All right, welcome back. Coming back to the fact, you explained that you're going this route of sort of digitizing hyper-local. this is something which a lot of companies have actually struggled and failed with.
Yep.
Right? What's the learnings you've seen?
Why will we win?
What's the learnings you have from what you saw there?
Sure.
And what's the change you see in the way you're approaching it and maybe how consumers are reacting to this?
Sure. So let me start with kind of laying out how people have approached generally hyperlocal retail. So you have a bunch of people that are own platforms. So this will be your Big Baskets, your Zomatos and Swiggies. Now, if you take your Zomatos and Swiggies, they actually have cracked hyperlocal in restaurants. So there is a success story there.
Right. Big Basket, Grofers tried it early on.
Yeah. So there was a bunch. There was Grofers, Local Banya, a bunch of players that had tried to approach it from a daily expense category. Now, the reason why I think at that point it didn't work, I think one, there was a macro market element to it. You didn't have as much data usage. I think we've gone through 3 years of market education, consumer education, and now geo-building the data highway for everybody. So I think there's that reality. The second is I think, they didn't take a merchant-led approach. They took a consumer-led approach. So what happened was the merchant, no one has really, very frankly, built with empathy for the Indian retailer. Everybody has been using the Indian retailer in the last 4 years. So what you have is, if I look at the ecosystem, you have the local retailer and you have the retailer's consumers. On one side, you have the B2B players that supply the retailer. This is everyone from your old distribution network to the metro cash and carries. And now you have a lot of tech companies from Udaan, Jumbo Tail, all these guys, Amazon, B2B, etc. They don't actually integrate with the store. They're just enabling a retailer to potentially buy at better prices more efficiently. On the far other side, if you say new consumers, you have now Swiggy stores, you have Dunzo, you have Magic Pin. These are actually consumer-led platforms that are saying, I actually need more fulfillment. I want to go into more categories. And I actually realize that it's more efficient to crack local retail because no one is going to be able to build. Just in Kiranas, there are 15 million Kiranas in this country. Who is going to build 15 million outlets? That's what it's going to take to supply, right?
Yeah.
And there's more than 60 million local retailers in general.
Wow.
So that depth and scale of distribution is you cannot build for that type of scale as a single entity.
Right.
So you have this layer built and people are saying, well, I can build directly for maybe the top 5 to 10 million. And if you look at the uniques of most of these platforms, they're around 5 to 8 million. No one has crossed that number. Right? So let's be frank, these huge companies are still servicing like a tiny portion of the company,
and
the country.
They're still going after, like you said, they're going after demand first.
Yeah.
Not supply or fulfillment per se.
But there is more demand. They just also, maybe the economics are harder in that segment. I don't think their products are designed for it. Like if you look at the apps that we all use, they're not designed for the Bharat consumer. How many of them have local language? Just let's start with that very basic point. Then I go to like the painful things of how much text there is, how much typing there is. The font size is so small. Like there's so many things that are fundamentally designing for a different segment versus the Bharat segment.
Right.
So I don't think it's a question of, I don't think they've thought of that consumer yet.
Right.
So I think if you look at that first wave of people who tried to do hyperlocal, one is macro market, two is they didn't start with a way that was empathetic and understanding of where their supply was coming from. And that's why they would have supply problems, right? You would just put in an order and then they would have to run around and find it. Yeah. But because they didn't start with thinking of merchants as users, they started thinking of merchants as my suppliers. Right. They didn't solve for merchant. And I think that's also where that ecosystem really fell apart.
Interesting. There's a lot of frustration from a lot of people who are in the merchant space, right? In terms of like how they have to interact with these various platforms, whether they're restaurants dealing with the Swiggy Scootsie or whether they are suppliers for Amazon or things like that, right? There is a lot of frustration. So I can see how there is a case to kind of make things more central to them.
How do you actually enable that beyond the products you've built to sort of build customer loyalty and retention? Use the digital stuff you've given them.
So the product today for retailers is, and we're a retail first company, and now all our consumer acquisition comes through retailers. So the retailers today basically get on the Mpaani app or the Mpaani platform, web platform. They will set up their store first. So immediately it creates a micro website and it creates a consumer profile in our app. Now, it's very different from, let's say, a profile that you would have seen in like a Zomato or Swiggy where it's a listing. We really try and make it feel like the store's app. So it feels like my own big basket. All my catalog is there. You can see that I'm running a program. We're adding a layer now, actually telling the stories of the business owners, because we really believe in local businesses. So I've set up my business. Then on top of that, I set up my CRM. So immediately they put all their customers into the platform. And then they have value-added options of setting up loyalty, setting up digital marketing. They can do digital invoicing. It's integrated with digital payments. And so we'll be integrating with all these third parties as well. Because the other thing that's happened is there's been so many people talking to retailers that they have to manage so many different systems, and none of them speak to each other. And it's already a user that feels overwhelmed by this like wave of tech. And so it's just... there needs to be a single cockpit through which everything can be operated. And so that's what we aim to be, that single cockpit. And we'd be happy to integrate with the B2B guys or the new orders guys, Swiggy stores, etc. But at least the retailer has a single place through which everything is working. And we're happy to, deal with any issue resolutions when it comes to these other kind of integrated services as well. So that's what the product is today. And now we're building the consumer layer on top of it, where it's not just one store for the consumer, but multiple stores. Now, some of the things where we differentiate ourselves is that, I'm not, if I'm a Kirana and I've enrolled you two into my shop, basically, Mpaani will now not show you to any other stores in my category because you're my existing customers. Right? So you have to think about honoring the retailer. Right? If he is a Kirana that has added his customer into the platform, you then cannot suddenly create competition for him. It's not the ethical thing to do. What we will do is then show you non-compete categories so you can build your neighborhood. And then we'll cross-promote non-compete categories of retailers, customers, so everyone can get customer growth together.
Will there be competition amongst non-competing categories? Let's say, for example, Shiladitya and I are not related to the person who brought somebody on board, but we are in the same kind of category. So would there be competing in that?
So if it is a completely new customer, they would get the opportunity, not your existing customer, they would get the opportunity to pick, and that's where your ratings and things matters. However, if it's your existing customer base, we will not show it to each other. Those will be black box separately.
So it's about who adds the customer first. Wow.
And what if let's say you buy ones from Shiladitya? I'm sorry, this might be just stupidly picky, right? But you buy from Shiladitya once, right? At that point in time, will you then only see him in that category, or would you continue to see?
So it would become your default store.
It would become your default store.
And then if you really, we'd make it a few clicks deep. If you really are not happy with him, of course, as a consumer, I'm not going to make you force you to stick with that, which is a natural consumer experience. If you're having a bad experience with one Kirana, you will walk down the street and get to it three different Kiranas. So you will still get that option. It will be facilitated, but we need to honor the retailer as well.
It's a very interesting, different approach to what the rest of the market is doing, because everyone, including, although they say, even the Ubers, right? Any two-sided marketplace sort of situation like this needs to cater to both sides of the marketplace. But you're distinctly saying, I am choosing the supply side and focusing my efforts to make sure that is more taken care of than the consumer per se at this stage, because you're growing. How does this affect, again, your conversations with investors today? Because now they've woken up to the Bharat and the consumer side Bharat. And obviously there's so much happening in this space now. How do you think about scaling? How will you scale beyond what you are today, and how are you going to make this happen?
So I think they definitely, like you said, are very aware that Bharat exists, because also they've tapped out the top 10 million. It's interesting. I think fundamentally what I've learned, and probably most founders have learned, at the outset, if, for example, an investor doesn't believe that the future of Indian retail is the modernization of local retail, which is what we believe, then we're not going to be able to convince them. So I think there has to be like a fundamental thesis level belief on both sides. And then the rest is kind of details. Do you believe we have the best solution over someone else? So immediately I think that filters out a bunch of people, because there's a big debate right now happening, I think, that do you believe in a single platform approach of like a big basket, or do you believe in a hyper-local approach of local retail actually in large part being the future? And I think there's some numbers that matter there. So local businesses in India are responsible for 40% of employment in the country. So from a mandate perspective, we cannot afford not to support local businesses.
Wow.
Right? So that is our core mission as a company as well. We're not supporting...
When you say local business, so how do you define it? Just so that everyone...
So just commerce in India, the market, so 2020, unorganized retail is 1.1 trillion of all commerce that goes. This is through your local businesses.
Right.
The organized sector is just 140 billion, which is your large format stores and all your online platforms.
Right.
And so that 1.1 trillion market is employing like nearly half the country.
Wow.
Right? So the more you try and move up, you're actually going to have like fundamental economic problems, economic development problems. And the same is true of local businesses and agriculture. These are our big employers or potential big employers. And so fundamentally, that's where we come from as well. That's what drives us, that we believe in local businesses because they are important to the country. We also believe in local businesses because I think they are much better servers of the consumer. So local businesses today are held back by the fact that they cannot go online or they don't understand tech. If you remove that layer, they have always been the most honorable and best custodians of the consumer. You've always got the best service from your local kirana. They give you credit. Who else is giving you credit? You know, they actually have a bigger collection of products because they've been profiling the neighborhood for so long, and they will carry single SKUs for that one person who he knows likes to buy this once a month. So the selection is much wider. They always do their best to remain price competitive. The issue right now is that VC funding is driving heavy discounting. But if you look at the actual market, you actually get great offers, discounts at local stores. They have the best proximity. They've been delivering to us within a few minutes on a single item basis, all these different permutations for such a long time. And I don't know in your experience, but in mine, I have never... not received 100% of the things I've ordered. So fill rates at local stores are like 95% or above. He may tell you, I need a few hours to get it. But there's never been a situation that what you want, you do not get. In fact, he will go and buy it from neighboring retail to put it in your basket, right? So when you have a player like this who has always taken care of the customer, is literally just being held back because they don't know how to go online, that's almost, I feel like, a very commoditized thing to build for them. And I think it's a level of care that a single platform can't build. One, they cannot build that depth of distribution. But are they going to provide credit? Are they going to have as many SKU options? Will they ever be able to do 15-minute delivery? They won't, right? So if we can be that like midware layer between the stores and the consumers, we should be able to deliver a much better consumer experience and scale it much faster, because all we're doing is converting existing supply. We're not building new supply across the country.
I think also you are providing, if you are able to get a certain amount of customer traction, you're seriously incentivizing the local businesses to start applying these kinds of technologies, which I think there is some resistance from some of them, right? I mean, like I talk to the people who we buy stuff from, right? And granted, it's probably not the target. It's not Bharat for sure where I live.
We're South Mumbai brats.
Exactly. So it's not Bharat. It's not Bharat for sure.
Not Bharat.
But at the same time, there's a tremendous amount of resistance around stuff like how to do stuff electronically in some ways, kind of like wanting to keep everything on paper. There is some resistance around this stuff. So if they...
The cash economy.
It is cash economy to an extent, but I don't think it's cash because GST is applied to all of this stuff. I make payments by check, so it's not like, it's cash in that sense, right? But it's just like, this is how we do it. So we don't want to have like things laid out. It's
just resistance.
Yeah, it's resistance. Yeah. It's resistance to technology because their customers are mostly not technical, right? Again, if I think
But that's very neighborhood specific, right?
It is.
So and that's changing. That's literally what's changing.
Yeah.
So like if I look at the challenges we faced 2014-15 versus today, 2015 was 100% this case, you know.
Right.
We were dealing with like the massive early adopters who were willing to use an SMS platform to launch a loyalty program, you know. Now we have retailers coming to us, very honestly. And, you know, my view is also 100% of retailers probably won't survive for a mix of reasons. I think the future will be 70% of the existing market, but they will grow in size. They will set up their own mini chains. And that will be a mix of things. You do have local retailers that, you know, the kids are not going to take over their business. They're professionalizing within the families. There will be some that are too intimidated by technology, will realize this is where this business is really going and maybe proactively opt out and start going into other types of businesses.
But I think the fact that you can you can deliver customers to them incentivizes them towards the idea that, hey, we should start moving to this. And I think that's
And they're having a
powerful piece.
retention problem for the first time. For the first time in the last year to 2 years, the local businesses, especially in tier 1 cities, are facing retention issues. It was always, theek hai, mere customers kahin nahi jaane wale hai. You can get me new customers.
Right.
But now that thesis has failed.
Yeah.
Right, especially in cities where the consumer is being bombarded with so many options, and even your buy is looking up things on Amazon first before she goes and buys. Her transaction now starts online. Her transaction may finish offline, but if she cannot see your store, she cannot see your products, and you don't provide her even with those comps, you don't exist as a retailer anymore for that younger generation. And then you have the dynamic more with our modernization and like increased liberalization. All women are working, especially again in metros. Couples now have very little time in all income groups. They're working late. The last thing they want to do is go and spend time do shopping for groceries. They'll want to go for a walk or an outing or spend time with their families. These are all new things for the local retailer. So because my existing customers are no longer assured, now retailers are changing their tune and saying, actually, my business is dropping.
Right.
And it's not dropping necessarily because Big Basket came along or Amazon came along. It's dropping because I cannot serve this new experience of the consumer. And so the consumer has more requirements, and they may not be using a business. They could still be just going to a D-Mart once a week or whatever it is. But how I'm serving them locally is not the best experience like it used to be. And
I agree. I think what I do see with a lot of people is like, you know, they do the big buying once a week by going to the Big Bazaar or D-Mart or one of those kinds of places. And then they use the local guy for the leftover stuff, the stuff that they need in an emergency.
So size of baskets reduced already.
Becomes much smaller.
I mean, I was literally speaking to one of our retailers yesterday who is now getting fully set up online. So he didn't have the full store set up. His business in the last 4 months has gone from 1 CR a month down to 80 lakhs a month.
Wow.
Oh.
Right? And these pressures are real. And I would say consumers don't really want to go to the D-Mart. If they could get their basket to their door, again, the friction of traveling in a city, the last thing you want to do is go and spend your entire Sunday traveling, carrying all
even
this
that's
stuff.
going away. I don't think that's where they're also moving to the tier 2s and 3s, right? So
and they
even
set up
organized
pickup
retail.
points, no? So D-Mart itself is setting up pickup points across the country to serve this dynamic.
There's different needs in the super urban scenario. There's different needs in a tier 2 and tier 3. And now, I mean, the 4 is just waking up and they're mobile first anyway.
Exactly.
So a whole different situation. But wow, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I think this reveals
really
a lot about
what
the changing scenario is for hyperlocal retail, and I'm sure Mpaani or whatever you choose to be will really make this happen. Any parting thoughts? Any parting notes? Or tell us about how you're growing, how the company's growing. You're 27 people. Are you hiring? Are you scaling up? Shout out to people who are listening. Where they can reach your Twitter handle, maybe.
Yeah, so we are easily reachable online, obviously at Mpaani and then at Akanksha Hazari. So I think the focus right now is we're continuing to build a complete single solution for the retailer with the ultimate goal that we tool out the retailer with a single cohesive set of products that speak to each other. and building into the consumer experience, which is relatively new for us. We've always been retailer first. Right. So I think that's what you can see coming for us in the next few months, frankly. So I think this year is going to be a really exciting year for us. And alongside that, obviously, we will scale our operations. We will move more capital into the company and start going out into the market and building and setting up more and more neighborhoods rapidly. And I think we have some really innovative ideas on how the future of hyperlocal will also look. Setting up new types of hyperlocal model, which will be co-owned with our business owners. So yeah, we have interesting things coming.
So we look forward to hearing more about it.
Boom. And just a reminder, everybody, if you are not signed up to the Slack channel, please do. It's on ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1. There's a button saying join the Slack channel, send us an email, and we'll send you back an invite. And also do a rating or a review wherever you're listening to this.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Screwella, first-generation entrepreneur and co-founder at Upgrad. My podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open, is a companion podcast to my best-selling book, Dream with Your Eyes Open. On this podcast, I talk to Amit Doshi, founder of IVM Podcast, about my entrepreneurial journey. I walk you through my successes and failures, mostly my failures, and the lessons that I learned from my experiences, family, and colleagues. What was my first entrepreneurial venture? Why I chose Japanese cartoons over animation cartoons on Hangama? Why did I sell my stake at UTV to Disney? Find out all this and more on the Ronnie Screwella podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open. New episodes out every Tuesday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi, I'm Vishal Gondal, an entrepreneur. I've had the chance to meet and understand how some of the super achievers have hacked their way to success, and they have done spectacular innovations. Now I take a closer look at these people's lives to find out what lies beneath the force, only on the Vishal Gondal Show. Episodes out fortnightly on Wednesdays on the IVM website, app, or your favorite podcasting platform.